Hey friends, one of the last videos that I did was on a 20 gauge shotgun, and it was basically showing you the effective use of a 20 gauge within the home as far as self-defense and home defense goes. Now, I prefaced this video and that video by talking about how there were limited modifications, if you will, for 20 gauge versus 12. 12, there's just a plethora of different aftermarket items, not to mention stock, really nice, cool, tacticalized stock stuff, where the 20 gauges are a little bit more limited. What I did was I spent some of my own money at Optics Planet. I'm actually a fan of Optics Planet, and it looks like if you take 5% off your next opticsplanet.com order by using the coupon code BXTZ5. So there you go, you can use my code. It's not like it's mine, it came on the outside of the box. But they have some pretty cool accessories over there. Of course, Optics Planet has a lot of stuff. I'm a fan of theirs. They didn't give me this, I bought it. Now, there were three things that I wanted to update my shotgun with. And they are it's a shell holder that goes on the buttstock, but it also doubles as a sling attachment. So I wanted that. I wanted a front sling attachment that's gonna go onto my magazine tube extension cap, extension. This is the magazine extension so that I can extend the amount of ammo that I have, and of course my spring that goes with that. These three things are going to give me a little bit more flexibility. Again, sling mount, holding more rounds, and carrying more rounds on the outside of the actual shotgun. A lot of things that are already available, again, in the 12 gauge model. So let's get right to it. First thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put the buttstock attachment on there with the shells on it. Very, very easy. I mean, all this stuff, look, you see the only tool that I brought today was a flathead screwdriver. So all this stuff is relatively intuitive. If you want to go ahead and look at the instructions, you don't have to. God knows I never do. But anyway, this is basically how you're going to install this. I've found that if you install this back strap or the back part of the strap first, because you're going to need to be able to bend this piece that holds the shells up in order to tuck this back strap down. So I pull it in and pull it as tight as I can, get my Velcro started, lift that up, and then I got a nice firm closure on that Velcro strap. Then you simply take this other Velcro strap, wrap it back around, and you are now good to go. Pull that nice and tight also. Again, your Velcro, you can always clean it all up and get it nice later on, but it's really that simple. See, I want a little bit tighter than that. A little bit tighter, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to take advantage of the tapering of the buttstock. If you notice, you got your tapering your buttstock, it tapers down from the larger end to the smaller end here. And by doing that, the tighter we put it, it's gonna make this part of the strap want to hold farther down towards the actual receiver instead of the back side of the buttstock. So it's gonna keep those pieces stretched out fairly well. So it's just a matter of even it back out the way you want, and you can put 6 more rounds on your buttstock for whenever you run out in your receiver. Now, of course, but for the sake of working up here, I want to check that again. I want to always make sure that I'm empty before I start working around the action and, of course, the muzzle itself. So the next thing I'm going to do is it's me a combination of things. I'm going to enter my, install my magazine tube extension, and I'm going to do my sling attachment. So let's take off the magazine cap. All basic stuff on a Remington 870. And then it's just a matter of loosening some things up, and your barrel assembly is going to come out. Now, the only thing I needed a tool for today was this magazine tube. I guess I'm going to call it a stopper. And really, it's very, very simple. You get a flathead screwdriver, you simply insert it into it, give it a slight turn until you can feel that it's going to exit. Now, be careful. You have to capture that old spring that's in there. Old spring. And what's kind of interesting, too, I noticed, was that my old spring on the bottom here is actually smaller than my new spring. Now, a couple of things that might be quality, of course, might be a better spring that I'm putting in there, but I'm also putting a longer spring in there by a good 10, 12 inches here. So this thing has to have a little bit more push to it. So you'll probably note the difference in size there. That's pretty considerable, to be honest with you. So I assume that's why. I'm hoping it's going to last a little longer, but again, having a little bit more strength over time. I'm not going to need this piece that I put on top, or that I took off on top, because that's just not going to be necessary from here on out, because the magazine extension is going to serve that purpose as far as capping that on the end there. Now, before we put our larger spring on there and the mag extension, remember, we want to install our sling attachment. So put your barrel back on. I just take the barrel off to get it out of the way so I can work on this other stuff. It just makes it a little bit easier because the barrel comes off and on so easily. Now remember, I'm going to put my sling attachment on here also. I want it to be on the left-hand side of my firearm because I'm a right-handed shooter, and that's where my sling attachment is on my strap that I put on the buttstock. So let me put this thing, slide it through my spring. Can be a little bit tricky sometimes. This is where it can get a little bit hairy because you're holding on to several things at the same time, feeding that spring in there under tension, of course. I take up as much tension as I can inside the magazine tube, and then I try to take up the rest of the slack in the actual mag extension, tube extension, because it just gives me a little bit more room to work because I need that hand in there to be able to hold on to it. Again, it can be tricky, but it is a one-man job. If you have a second person to give you a third hand, probably wouldn't hurt, but it really is that simple. And you want to get that thing on there as tight as you possibly can because you're going to be putting your strap on there as well, your sling strap. I don't have a problem with someone because you're kind of taking away a little bit of the threads there. When you put this sling attachment in there, you're probably a good turn and a half that you're eliminating. So you want to make sure you get on there nice and tight so that it doesn't back itself off. What I've found you can do is take a rag and get some channel locks and maybe give this thing a nice little tug so that you're not marring the outside of your actual nut right here. But again, you can probably get it hand tight pretty good. And then at that point, these two pieces you really don't need anymore. Put them off to the side in case you make a modification later on and you decide you want that back again. But other than this piece right here that's going to keep my barrel and my magazine tube separated from one another, that's pretty much it. Let's go ahead and install that real quick, and then we will be done. You want to separate those that nut off that screw a little bit just so that this thing can clear everything that you're dealing with. It does that fine. I like to keep mine, because you're doing this in some cases for a little bit of strength. I like to keep mine about midways through between the end of the magazine tube and where the nut actually is, just for a little bit of strength. If I do anything, I want it to be a little bit farther down. In other words, if I don't put it right in the middle, I put it a little farther down. Of course, I've already scratched it. But again, I don't know, for the sake of looking nice, I tend to like to put them in the middle right there. So that is pretty much going to be it, guys. This is a really easy set of modifications right here. As you can see, we have tacticalized this thing in a very short period of time. We've got room for 6 rounds over here. We've added a magazine tube attachment extension over here to add, I don't know, what is it, 4 or 5 more rounds in there other than the 3 that I'm already holding. So I'm going to be up to 7 or 8 rounds plus the 6 over here. I've got my sling attachment here, and of course, again, this piece over here does have a sling attachment also. So that's what I like about this. I like the fact that you can spend a very little bit of money. I'm probably under $200 right there. Oh heck, well under $200 for what I just put on here. Probably, I'll post the prices and the links of where you can find this stuff on there. From a tactical standpoint, if I need to utilize this shotgun now, to me it's a little bit more usable. Probably the only other thing that I would probably recommend that you might be able to do is you might want to add some rails on here. I don't know if you're wanting to put a weapons light on here or anything of that nature. I mean, you could always put a little bit of Picatinny over here somewhere on the mag tube. Something will grip on there. There's tons of little attachments that will do that. So you could definitely put a weapons light on there. I'm a fan of the wood stock. I like the old classic wood stock. I'm not looking to change this out with one of those cool looking Magpul stocks because I dig this. I like the old wood stock. It's a comfortable feel for me. A little old fashioned, OG here. So I'm gonna stick with the wood stock. But there again, guys, don't paint yourself into a corner. Even though there are limitations in the aftermarket things that are available to deck out your 20 gauge, yeah, 12 gauges definitely have the lead on that. There's plenty of stuff out there for 12 gauges. But again, don't let that work yourself out of and talk yourself out of getting a 20 gauge and doing the same thing, because there are definitely some possibilities that will lend yourself to making this thing, using the right firearm for the right purpose, and not overcompensating with a 12 gauge just because. You know, you don't want to paint yourself into a corner using the wrong caliber or the one that you're not the most comfortable with, simply because there's a lack of accessories out there. There are plenty of accessories for the 20 gauge. Guys, as I always like to say, never be afraid to be the safest person in the room and the deadliest.